In this video, I will share some inputs and ideas on how to harvest outcomes together in an outcome harvesting workshop. First of all, if you choose to do the sessions online, then I will introduce you quickly to Miro. So that is the virtual collaboration platform that I would recommend for online sessions. But there are other platforms out there that you can choose if you're more familiar or prefer other platforms. But for the sake of this video, I will set up the examples in Miro. So let's see how it looks like. So there are different tutorials on how to use the Miro board. So I won't go too much into how to navigate and what type of functions there are. As mentioned, it's good to prepare the setup and design of the board already. So you can zoom in on the board either using your mouse or here in the right button corner where you can use the zoom in and zoom out function. And here I put in an arrow. So because I prepared different frames for different sessions, then it's useful to have an arrow to indicate for the participants where we are. Also, I created here a frame with a help center. So if people need any additional online support, they can either voice that directly, of course, in the by unmuting themselves or in the chat box in Zoom or Teams. But also here is a comment function where you can click on the comments, and then you can invite participants to write here any support or difficulties they might have. And here you can ask your co-facilitator to keep track on this help center. So this is optional, a tip for how to setting it up. And for each board or each of these frames, I create one session. So I will dive a bit more into these different sessions in a bit. But here also I've copy-pasted in some pictures or some slides that are helpful for each of the sessions. For instance, in the session on differentiating between output, outcome, and impact, I pasted directly the explanation of the different levels of results. And the same as for the session on brainstorming and outcomes, also having a slide here with the definition of what is an outcome. And here for the session on outcome statements, I've already put in the setup with the outcome title, the evidence of the outcome, the description, relevance, significance, contribution and evidence of the contribution. And down here is the description of the different elements of the outcome statement. So if people doing the exercise doubt, what should be in the outcome title, they can quickly refer to these slides. And the way you can use the Miro platform is to set up these post-its, and you take a post-it here on the left side panel, and you can choose a color. If I take a yellow one, and you post it where you want. So this is how you set up all the post-its. And here on the top, I usually would ask the participants to write their names. This is a bit small, so I make it bigger. So each participant will have their name listed here. So you might, if you have more participants, you might need to prepare more post-its. And here for each exercise, the participants can then directly type in the output or an example of that outcome or impact here. So for the reviewing part of the workshop, then it's very convenient because everyone can see everyone's inputs and what they've been formulating. So this is for the write shop. And below are some examples for the analysis and sense making that I will dive into later in the sense making part. So this is how it can look like. And before diving into all the harvesting exercises or practicing the harvesting and formulating outcome statements together, some ideas for introductions are provided here, both offline and online. So as mentioned in an earlier video, it's important to give the time to properly introduce the participant, especially if they are meeting for the first time. So an idea for an exercise to introduce when you're face-to-face is to ask the participant to walk around in the room and find a other person who have a common trait. So for instance, someone else wearing the same color t-shirt as you, or someone with the same color hair as you, or someone who is wearing the same color of pants. So you can be more creative with what traits to look for, or maybe even something that's not apparent. You can also say someone who has studied the same at school as you, and then people will have to ask each other where they studied to find a person who studied the same subject. And once you identify that person with a common trait or some or common background, then you can introduce yourself. And here, as a facilitator, you might provide some guiding questions for people to use when introducing themselves. For instance, what is your superpower? What is a surprising thing about yourself that not many knows? And of course, the standard as maybe what is your role? Which organization are you from? And what is your name? And both online and offline, you can use the exercise of bringing an item that symbolizes something about you, or an item that for you represents the topic of the workshop. So for instance, if it's since it's an outcome harvesting workshop, then maybe a participant chooses to show a plant if it's a happening online to symbolize how the seeds grow into outcomes. So using this to tell a story about yourself. And another exercise online can be for people to, on a Miro board ahead of the session, to paste in their childhood picture and then guessing who's who on these pictures. So these are just different ideas, but there are many ways of introducing yourself to each other. And for the starting with the harvesting, then the first exercise that I recommend is to take some time for the participant to differentiate between output, outcome, and impact. So if you do this online, then as I already shown, you can do it in the Miro board where everyone writes their name and then provide an example of an output. So it can be something from that particular project they're working on, or an output from their own life, and also example of an outcome and impact. So the purpose of this exercise is really for people to understand, okay, when we talk about outcome harvesting, what is an outcome then, and how does that differ for output and impact? Typically, especially output and outcome can be difficult to distinguish. So we use this exercise to really make it clear what are the criteria for a result to be qualified as an outcome in outcome harvesting. If you do the outcome harvesting workshop face-to-face, then what you can do instead is to have 3 flip charts with empty posters spread around across of the room. And one of them you write output, another outcome, and the third impact. And people can then walk around the room and write their examples on each of the flip chart. And afterwards, you look at them together and together define what are the criteria of an output, outcome, and impact. The next step is to brainstorm on the outcomes together. So here, if you are doing it online, as shown in the Miro board, you can either do it in breakout groups. If you have different organizations, for instance, present, then maybe you can make different groups with one for each of the organization, and then using the post-its in the Miro board to type in all the outcomes. You can also choose to do this in the plenary if it's a group that is very well familiar with the projects and the results that has emerged. And doing it in person, you can either ask people to maybe start individually, writing on colored papers, all the outcomes they can think of, and then pull all the outcomes together and look at the pile of outcomes and check if anything is missing, or you can have an open brainstorm. So here it's only the creativity that sets the boundaries of how you want to facilitate this session. Following that, there's the step-by-step outcome statements. So if we are starting to, after formulating the outcomes, then it's going down step by step. First, with the outcome, we want to write it into a title containing the element of what, when, where, and who. So you can also use this outcome title to break down these 4 elements and do a peer review. So explaining what the title contains, the more theoretical part, asking the participants to write down the title and then review in pairs. The same afterwards then for contribution. And the reason why that we do the contribution before the relevance, which is normally in the outcome statement, is after the relevance. The reason is that based on experience, it shows that it's easier to, after the title, immediately write what the specific activities led to this change that is captured in the title, in the outcome title. And this also makes it easier afterwards to write down the relevance. So then you encourage the participants to think about the direct connection right away after writing the title. And again, going through this element of the outcome statement and writing together, reviewing, and together in plenary, highlighting any main insights. And this is also done for relevance and lastly, evidence. So this step-by-step approach allows to really break down the outcome statement and focus on what needs to be part of each element. So how does it look like in practice to write and review the outcome statements during a workshop? If you're setting up the harvesting session digitally, then you can use this right picture as an inspiration for how to set it up. Here we have, with the red posters, the 2 first lines are the outcome title and the evidence of the outcome. The purple post-its is where the participant can write the description, and the pink is the relevant significance, and below the orange, the contribution and relevance, the evidence of the contribution. And on the first line, you can ask the participants to each select a post-it and write their names, and they will be working vertically down, each having 1 column to formulate their outcome. After having working on the first part, so the outcome title and the description, you can pair the participants up in breakout rooms and ask them to review each other's formulations to make sure that they get inputs and feedback continuously while formulating the statement. And again, go after the breakout room, you can return to the plenary and highlight a few key insights and continue with the contribution. If you're doing it in person, then you can either ask the participant to formulate the outcome statements in paper. However, I would recommend that the participant bring their laptop if possible and write the outcome statements directly there. It's more convenient also for printing out the outcomes afterwards if there will be a sense-making session. Also in this way, the participant can exchange their laptops with each other and using the track changes function to provide feedback to each other. You also want to make sure to set up a Box folder before or a Google Drive folder where the participant can submit or simultaneously work on these documents. So this review process that I describe is a very iterative process of gaining feedback from your peers and improving the outcome statements after each review and better understanding what needs to be part of which element. And also as the harvester reviewing someone else, statement also help you to understand, oh, this information actually needs to be part of this outcome statement in order to make it understandable for someone who is not directly involved in the project or in that element of in that particular change. And in between the sessions, as already mentioned, the facilitator can provide individual feedback. So if it's a face-to-face workshop, the facilitator can do that in the evening. Or if it's online, then in between the session where the facilitator can input the comments and feedback directly into the Miro board. So this is also to make sure that everybody gets proper feedback from the facilitator. And finally, the plenary. So after each process of writing, reviewing, then there will be a plenary part where the essence of the individual feedback is summarized so everyone can learn from that. And this is both the peer-to-peer feedback and the individual feedback from the facilitator. So this is something that everyone then can learn from.